We're good.
All right, guys. Thanks very much for joining our fourth deep dive. This is a bit of a mix of groups. Now we have what, three groups? We have TRJ, we have the Audio Outsiders, and remind me the name of this group as well.
Senior Planet. Actually, we have another name, but I don't remember what it is. Brad might remember it. But people from Senior Planet.
Home
Okay,
studio songwriters.
Home Studio Soundwriters. Okay, right. So this being the fourth one, we had a request to take a look at some synthesizers. Um, Impossible to start talking about synthesizers. God, I'm gonna be tripping up on that word the whole time. Without doing a synth intro. So let's start with that. All right, enough of that. Enough of that. Okay, so right. So what we when people talking synthesizers, I think the thing that the impression I got is what we want to know is not just how to use presets and stuff, but what all these fancy looking buttons do, right? This is when you open up any kind of analog synth panel, work table or whatever. You're gonna see just a flood of these rotary switches, these pots, right? Everybody can see my screen okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, cool. So, and this, for anybody, is very, very, very intimidating to start off with. What the point of this demo is to try to simplify things, and let's take a look at what some of these buttons do. So, first and foremost, this is by the way, I'm using Logic Pro X. In case you're wondering why this door looks so impressive, this is Logic. Um,
Is there any way you can expand that window, just the synth panel?
right. So yeah, this is one of the synthesizers. The thing about Logic, say what you will, good or bad, Logic has tons and tons and tons of instruments built into it. Okay, and they're fantastic instruments. And I think that that's even more than what you get with some of the other doors out there, right?
Excuse me, Khalid. Is
Yeah,
there
go
any
ahead,
way
Ethan.
can you expand the synth panel so it's easier to read the markings?
I sure, but I'm not even gonna stay on this one very long. But
Okay.
here you go. Can you see that better now?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sorry I
Great.
couldn't hear you before.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so um, basically, so this is what I'm trying to do is to go through to take a look at what things would look like. I'm trying to find one or two synths that resemble a classic analog synth, actual physical synthesizer, right? Something that our friend here Ari said that how he built one when a couple years ago or so, right? So basically, this is way more complicated than it actually looks, right? When we talk synths, what we're talking about, or when we're talking about synthesis, what we're talking about is diff voltages, right? And oscillators, right? What is an oscillator? Well, technically it's called a VCO, voltage controlled oscillator. Basically, what you're doing is, remember, this is all in the realm of electronic music. So what you're doing is you're taking the basis of it. It basically has two circuits. First circuit is to take a voltage and to modulate it in a particular way. Now, even with no modulation whatsoever, once you have a voltage going through a circuit, you basically generate a sine wave. Okay? And sine wave just means, evenly symmetrical oscillating pattern. By the way, I'm gonna keep talking until somebody stops me, right? So please feel free to interrupt me at any point.
Right, and please keep muted unless you do have something to say, and I will continue to mute people who unmute and don't mute themselves back. So, just for
Sure.
courtesy of the speaker, that's all.
No problem. Okay, so basically, once you have a voltage running through the circuit, it creates a sine wave. Okay, now a sine wave sounds very, very um, plain. It doesn't have a whole lot to it, right? As a matter of fact, any of us who's ever done an audiogram, a hearing test or so, and they play those tones, that's kind of what a sine wave sounds like, right? There's no harmonic content in it or anything, okay? So that creates a shape, right? The second circuit, now if you vary the voltage of that shape up and down on a separate circuit, you then create different pitches, right? So this is why we call it a voltage control oscillator, because as you vary the voltage, you basically control the shape and the pitch of the oscillator. So that's what an oscillator is. You're going to hear that word anytime you look into synths. You're going to hear a couple of recurring words for sure, and definitely the word oscillator is going to come up a lot. And you wonder why they're using the word oscillator? Well, that's why, because it comes from the analog world. So this is basically what a sine wave sounds like. Right? And once again, it's just very plain. It's very straightforward. Okay? Now, you saw me turn off these three things here. And you notice that this got very, very... I could turn off things here and it gets very, very simple all of a sudden, because all I'm dealing with is this. So in the most basic of synthesizers, you just have one sine wave, one oscillator at a time, one VCO at a time, right? So that's what this looks like. This thing right here, this box here, is basically the entire VCO, sine wave generator. And I can even take that and I could change it from sine to square to triangle, and all sorts of different presets, and to saw, right? There are a couple shapes that you find reoccurring in the most basic of synths, right? Certainly sine, triangle, square, and there's even one called pulse wave modulation, which we'll get into in a second. Okay. So I'm gonna get rid of this because this, even with me turning off this looks complicated. So let us go into a synth that far more resembles a typical analog synthesizer, right? So anybody who has an analog synthesizer, there's probably a lot closer to what it looks like, because that one, Alchemy, is a way more modern thing. So if we take... So once again, this right here, where you see shape 1 and shape 2, this synth has 2 oscillators. So, and each oscillator, you can change the shape, right? So this one down here is actually just noise. It's like white noise. This one here is a saw shape. This one here is a square shape. And this one up here is something called pulse wave modulation, which is just another shape that they generate that with very fast voltage changes, you can generate a more hollow metallic sound that has very little low end. Let's not confuse you with that so far, just yet, right? So basically, at its core, this right here is the VCO, right? Now, what we have here in this synthesizer is we have 2 oscillators. And this mix allows us to make a blend between the 2 oscillators. So all the way at 0 here is fully on synth 1 or oscillator 1, and all the way down here is fully on oscillator 2. Okay? And I can put it at 50% and make a blend of the 2 of them, right? So let's hear what that sounds like. I'm going to go to oscillator 1. Let's take a sawtooth. So this right here, you see it looks like a sawtooth. So that's what you call saw. Now I should also say that without getting too technical, the point of these shapes is that each shape creates a different amount of harmonic content. Okay? Basically, in the harmonic series, you can get different harmonics or different recurring harmonics throughout the shapes. right? So a sine wave has no harmonics, whereas, and if you're interested at all, a triangle shape has odd harmonics. I make absolutely no attempt to memorize any of this, so I have it down, right? Triangle has is a symmetrical shape with odd harmonics, right? A square has odd numbered harmonics. So it's not, so it's only like the third, the fifth, the seventh odd numbered harmonics. Saw has every harmonic in the series, and yeah, that's enough of that. All right. So the point is, different shapes give you different kind of buzzes. That's what it comes down to. And when you layer things on, it creates a thicker sound or more complex sound, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go from a simple voltage sine wave and then build on that with different shapes and different types of modulation to make something more musical, more exciting and interesting. Everybody happy with this so far? Any questions? Take in silence as affirmations
Well,
move on.
one
Okay.
thing, it might be more well valuable to me if you would, each time you talk about a different sine wave, remind us what they sound like.
Sure. No problem at all. So the sine, this synth does have a sine shape here. So I remember I think you should be okay with what the sine sounds like. Because that's just a tone, right? The saw, on the other hand, well, actually, let's take the triangle. The triangle is the next most the next step up, next most complex step up. So this is the triangle, right? Let's go to the saw. Actually, the next one above that with more harmonics would be the square. Right? So as you can hear now, there's like definitely a little bit more excitation going on, more harmonics on top. And then the saw has the most, all the harmonics. Fair, easy so far? Jay?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And just to show you what the pulse wave modulation sounds like, as you go from so pulse wave modulation, these shapes are actually self-explanatory. So these oscillations here in the shape, right? These movements in the shape show you what the voltage is doing. So it's like very abrupt changes, right? And in this one here, this pulse width modulation, what they've done is they've shortened the upstroke but kept the downstroke as long as it was before. And what that does is it kind of makes it more hollow and metallic. So let's go from, let's take a... Right? So you see how like the low end just basically completely goes. It's not quite a filter, but it's just the way the excitation happens, or the way the frequencies which are being accentuated, that's how the shape works out. So as you have so basically at the fundamentals with synthesis, you have an oscillator with a shape, okay? And we're gonna just stick with that for now. I'm aware of how complicated this thing looks and how it can be. So let's try to keep it simple. So I'm going on one oscillator for now. See, the mix is all the way up here. So this is just the top oscillator. And we're going to go sawtooth pattern, which is, you know, what most synths, typically kind of use. That's their main go-to. Let's forget all these controls for now. Let's move over to the filter, right? The filter looks a lot like it. This should look, actually, you know what? Even before we go to the filter, let's go to this thing called the amplification envelope, right? Amp stands for amplification. So there are 4 letters that we have to think about when we start modulating. ADSR. Attack, decay, sustain, release. Okay, once again, stop me if I'm going too fast. This works a lot like a compressor, and I'm aware that that may not help anything right now. But the point is that attack is attack is in time. These things have to do with time, and the amplification envelope is like a volume envelope. And what this does is it takes the tone and it tells the synth how to shape the volume of that tone. So once again, we're on a sawtooth. Only one oscillator right now. Forget about the filter. Let's just hear what happens when you increase the attack time. So as you can see, so basically these points here are the different points. So this is attack. This is decay. Decay. Sorry. This section here doesn't have a node. Excuse me. This doesn't have a node, but this is the sustain and this is the release. Excuse me, gosh. So what this graph is telling us is that it's going to think of the y-axis as volume and the x-axis as time. The y-axis, with this y-axis, this is telling us that it's going to take 150 milliseconds for the signal to get to full volume. After which it is going to come down some, right? And it's going to take 2.3 seconds to get down here, and then it's going to sustain for a bit, and then this tail here, this section down here, indicates what happens when we release the key. Is that making sense so far? So what happens when so if I have a fast attack, you hear the full volume immediately. Right, now let's slow the attack. Right, let's slow the attack even more. Right, so that took a full 10 seconds for the volume to reach full. Hopefully that's clear so far. Now then, so let's have just a slowish attack. So you could hear it fading in, right? And let's pull down the decay. So let's hear what happens here. So you can hear that the volume goes up and then it comes down, right? And it comes down to this sustained point. So where you hear the volume level out and stay there, that's a sustain, right? Now I'm still holding the key. I'll remove my finger when I let go of the key, and you can hear what happens with the release. Okay, so that was a key off. Now I'm going to put a much longer release, and you'll see what happens when I put my finger down is when I've removed my finger from the key. And I'm just going to put it a little bit louder so that you can hear. So. And you see the volume takes much longer to taper off, right? So this volume envelope is just on the one oscillator. This is going to tell us how that oscillator behaves, okay? So that is volume. Now let's talk about the filter. The filter is basically like any EQ. Now with the filter, we have, just like a filter, this is basically a low pass filter. You have a bunch of different types of filters. So you have LP stands for low pass, right? These are low pass filters. BP stands for band pass. And band pass means that you're going to have cuts on either side, right? HP stands for high pass. And BR stands for band, I think, is it resonance or band reduction? I think band reduction. I think that's what that is. Right. So, and basically what that means is that it's reduced it's done a scoop in the band, in that particular band. And you can move this. You can hold that node and you can move it wherever you want. So most of the time you tend to use low pass filters. So let's go back to that one. Okay. Now, cutoff here is another synth term. Cutoff means where the signal is being cut. Happy so far? So we have it here, and then the cutoff point is at this frequency, and everything after that gets cut. And it's getting cut, in this case, by a factor of 24 decibels per whatever. Could never remember that. Okay. If we can move this left to right, and let's hear what that sounds like. So it's basically we're just varying how much of the high frequencies are being let through or not, or being filtered out, right? Because it's a filter, right? And then the next thing, let's reduce that. Okay, the next thing is what's called resonance. Resonance is a boost of frequencies. It's basically a feedback loop at the cutoff frequency. Resonance is always at the cutoff frequency. So basically right here is our cutoff frequency. If I pull this up, I'm going to create resonance, and it takes that specific frequency and feeds it back into the signal. So this is what that sounds like. This is zero resonance. And it does sound kind of almost, gritty, nasty, like feedback almost, right? So, that, once again, these are all static controls, right? This is not doing anything. These are just going to be static adjustments. You have the shape, we have a volume envelope as to what that signal is going to sound like, and then we have a filter. Now, you could stop right there. But we want to be more complicated than that. So basically the first set of synthesis would have basically started there. We want to be more complicated because we want to do things that sound like this. Right? There's all sorts of different things going on there. Let's take just this one alone. Listen to this synth bass. Notice there's all sorts of like almost like arpeggios going on there, right? How about this one? There's sweeps and there are laser beams going off and all sorts of things. And then let's take this one. All sorts of wobble effects going on there. So how do we do that? Because I used this same synthesizer to do those three things, and this is just barely scratching the surface. So let's take a look at what happens when we introduce not that, but the second wave. So we have this wave, which is a sawtooth. Sounds simple enough. Now let's bring in the other wave, and this one is saw, and this one is square. It doesn't sound like much now. Doesn't sound like much right now because these are not that different. So you can hear like a little something is going on, but not a whole lot, because this is equal signal between the two oscillators. So what's that all about, right? Well, they're playing exactly the same note, the same frequencies. So, I mean, sure, with a couple little harmonic variations, but not that much, right? So what you can do with the second oscillator is you can start to detune it. And there are two ways here that we can detune this. We can either go in semitones or in cents. Cents are there are 100 cents make up one semitone. So let's hear what happens when I start detuning it a little bit in at least semitones to start with, so you can hear that easily. Sounds like something like out of classic Nintendo Zelda or something like that, right? Right? If I knew the theme for Zelda, I'd play it right now. So, but that's very, very even. So let's detune it even more with some cents. All right. right? So you see it's starting to get all sorts of, definitely way more wobbled, right? Right? So now we have two waves going on here. Once again, stop me if I'm going too fast. Huh? We have two waves going on here, and these two waves combined are now affected by this volume envelope, this amplitude envelope. So let's push along. So when you have a longer attack, that's kind of, if you think of a synth pad, you know, a nice ambient, ethereal pad, it's usually because it has a very long attack. Right? But if you want to do like a lead, a synth lead, you'd want a very fast attack because you want it to hit immediately, right? And don't confuse release with reverb. It does kind of sound, it's not really reverb, but it just lingers around a lot more, right? So we have two immediately already. Now we have two waveforms that are interacting with one another, right? And immediately we have a far more complex. We've doubled the complexity of the signal, of the overall waveform. Now, let's go back to the filter. Sorry. Nope, not that. Where am I going? All right. Now, so we have this filter here. And yeah, sure, okay, it has some stuff, but we want it to sound a little bit more interesting than that. Well, guess what? Sorry, Joe, are you trying to say something? No? Okay, sorry. Okay. So, but now we can use this thing called the envelope. And what the envelope is going to do is that it's going to kind of open and close that filter, the cutoff on the filter. And basically this is a depth control. So we could choose how much to open and close it. So 0 would be nothing. And then I can, and this basically, this envelope is now attached to this plot down here. And it's the same controls, ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, and release. So we can now draw a plot here as to how much we want, or how long it takes for the envelope for the cutoff or the envelope to open and close. I know this is where it gets a little complicated, but let's just hear how it sounds like. So I'm gonna increase the depth. That's just basically the amount of authority the envelope has. And this is with nothing. So I'm gonna make that just square. Right? Let's increase the attack and see what that does. So what this is doing is that it's opening, the envelope is increasing the amount, the frequency range, the spectrum that is being let through, right? If the envelope is completely closed like this, you're just gonna hear this plot completely and no change whatsoever. But by giving it some authority, you're allowing a change in how much the envelope can, how long it takes the envelope to open. Let me know if that confuses you at all. Right? So that's the attack. Let's bring down the decay a little bit, because just like the volume envelope, this is basically just a time plot as to how long it's going to take the envelope to fully open and then kind of close back a little bit and stay right there. The one thing about the release, I will say, even before I get that, let's just hear what happens when I move the decay down. So let's pay attention to just what happened there. The envelope opened up to full and then closed back down a little bit because of this decay. Remember, on top, the y-axis is amplitude, or I don't want to call it volume in this case because it's not volume, but it's amount, right? It's the amount the envelope is opening and closing. And the x-axis is time, right? So I'm going to put a little bit longer of a decay time. Right, so you hear wow. So once again, it comes up and it comes down and then it sustains here. That's the amount. This is the overall end result of where the envelope is going to be. Now there's not going to be any release unless the volume envelope has some release as well. So you have to put a little release on the volume envelope, and then you can this release here will take effect as well, and it'll basically close the envelope all the way down to 0. Okay, so as the signal is releasing, because you've lifted the key, the envelope is going to latch on to just that part alone and close all the way by this amount of time. I'm gonna pause for a second for questions, because this is already getting kind of heavy. And come, somebody hit me with a question.
Phil had suggested in the chat if you had some sort of interface with an oscilloscope that could show us how the signal is changing visually, that might help us see what's going on as well as hearing
I
it.
can try to do that. Let's do that. Where are the effects? Let's put in the EQ, channel EQ, and analyzer. Okay. Is this not on the correct one? What did I do? Did I do something wrong? Why is that not showing? That should be showing. Ah, right. Okay, so let's just. So this really would be for to show you what the So basically down here is your fundamental, right? And these are your overtones up on top here. These are all the harmonics. So what you'll see is everything comes up because I have the attack to 0 basically. So everything is going to come up immediately, and then you'll see the overtones start to decrease. Now if I put the decay all the way up, it should pretty much hold. Is that clear as mud? And similarly, even with that, if I just move the envelope, the cutoff. So that's basically the fundamental frequency there. And as I increase high-end content, you'll see all these harmonics start popping up. And there's your resonance. Okay. Right. I don't think we need to keep that up because it's not about looking at it. It's about listening to what listening to decide if this is something you want or not. Okay. All right. So we've covered the two shapes. Well, two oscillators interacting with one another. We've covered the filter. We've covered the amplitude envelope and basically the ADSR. That is, in terms of static things, probably the most important thing I would say off the bat. All right. Everything we talk about subsequently now is going to be additional effects. Okay. So if there's any questions on this, feel free to ask now, because we're going to move on to slightly more complicated things, unfortunately. Right? Okay. So when you talk about, okay, let's take this one. Do you hear that shuddering, that da 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 da? Okay? That's what's called an LFO. And if you're talking synths, you have to talk about LFOs. Well, now, what on earth is an LFO? LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. So when I said that there were only 2 oscillators in this synth, it's not quite accurate. This thing called an LFO. And look, it's right here, right? Under filter, you have LFO. Low frequency oscillator applies or refers to another waveform that's built in that is below the range of human hearing. So it's it is below 20 hertz basically, and it comes in there and it interacts with the sum of the waves, okay, to create different effects. And what it basically does is that you can link it to, especially in more modern synths, you can link it to all sorts of different effects. It does not produce necessarily an audible tone on its own because it's below human hearing, but it influences the other waveforms. Okay, so this LFO button here or toggle here is just like the envelope, is the depth. It's the amount of effect that you are going to give it. And over here, you have, just like how you have different shapes up here, you have different shapes down here because it is a waveform. Okay, so you have a sawtooth, you have reverse sawtooth, you have triangle, you have square, and what is the name of this one again? I forget. Stand by. Oh, whatever it is, doesn't matter, right? This one is it's like a square, but not as drastic, you know, where a square is full on one way and then full on in the other way. This one is more in the middle ground. So what this is going to do, once again, is going to interact with our waveform to create basically like a kind of like a tremolo. I want to say that. Yeah, kind of like a tremolo. Because with a vibrato, because you see we have vibrato here as well. And even here as well. Vibrato is going to be based on pitch, whereas tremolo is just based on volume, right? So this synth, because it's in a DAW, we can sync it to the DAW tempo. And this looks a little bit more familiar where you have, a time-based interval, right? So 8th note, 16th note, 8th note triplet, all that sort of thing. So let's just do 8th note and hear what this does. What have I done? Wrong one. Right. Instrument theater, yes. Okay, so immediately we start getting almost like a arpeggiated sound, right? So I'm going to put it up quite severely and let's hear what the different waveforms sound like with this LFO. So that was a square. We'll go triangle. I will just go through. You can see them. Y'all can see them, right? Y'all can see the synth well enough? Hopefully. Okay. Okay, and with the squared, it almost sounds like completely interrupting the signal because it's so strong. And you can adjust the amount of effect that the LFO has on the signal with this toggle here. So it's just a straight shape, and then you can affect the amount. It's almost like a parallel kind of thing. If you think of, when you think of mixing, and you have parallel compression, and you could feed it back in, it's kind of like that, right? It's just the amount of effect. So we have this shape. We can choose how much we want to do, like meaning how fast we want to do it. So, and we have the amount, right? So that is on the signal itself. Now that is on the summed signal itself. But on this particular synthesizer, which I think you should have on some of the other synthesizers as well, is you can you notice down here has LFO as well. And it has two toggles. This thing called shape modulation, you can go from LFO to filter envelope. And what this does is this will modulate the way that the two signals interact with one another. So if we put this to LFO, it means that this oscillator is going to interact with this oscillator under these parameters. All right, and let's hear what that sounds like. I'm going to go from here and I'll put it a little bit lower. Okay, so that is a modulation between the two signals, whereas this over here was the modulation of the entire combined signal. So you could create even more variation. And similarly, if you push it the other way, it basically, to filter envelope, is that it will create, if you draw a plot here, it will modulate between these two signals over this plot here. I'll show you what that sounds like. Okay. What I will do is I will go through some of these settings that we have here to kind of build up how we get to something like that. The last thing, okay, there are a couple more things. Now we do actually technically have another oscillator. It's not really, you don't have any control of it, but in this particular synth, you can generate a sine wave, just a pure sine wave, on top or below these other oscillators as well. And it's just a volume control for the sine wave. So, and it's a pretty low signal. So, there you can hear it. So basically the way that the sine wave kind of presents itself in a signal is it adds a lot of low end. It doesn't have any real harmonics or anything. It's just a bunch of low end. Okay. And in this particular synth, you have a flanger. Anybody who plays guitar knows exactly what a flanger does. You have a mix and you have an effect, right? So there's no need to dive into that. Couple other things quickly. This one here is an interesting one. This is called glide. And what that does is it sort of blends the one note into the other one, kind of like a slur, right? So presently, it's very, the two notes are very separate. Look at what happens when I increase the glide, and it's in time. So time dictates how long it takes from one note to blend into the other one. Right, that's trippy, right? And I could go even further away. Right? So that's how you get that's how you get things to blend together a little bit. So certainly on a lot of leads, a lot of synth leads, you might hear those kind of wobble effects. I mean, it's amazing to think that this is an emulator of an actual mechanical, circuit board device that just with varying voltages and different circuitry that you could create all of these different things, right? I mean, I feel like you have to be an electrical engineer to create this and come up with all this stuff, right? Another couple things real quick as well is in the settings page of this, you can transpose if you want. So let's just say you have a very small keyboard. You can transpose the whole thing up and down the keyboard itself, right? So that you could play the same keys but have in a different octave. That's one thing. tune. Tune is an interesting thing. So let's say that we had this synth here is at the way that this works is, let's just say we have it detuned to 10 cents below. They're both on the same, they're both playing the same note, but the second oscillator is tuned 10 cents below. Because this is an equal combination of two of both of them, what that equals to is basically 5 cents of detuning, if that makes sense. Because one is directly on pitch and the other one is detuned by 10 cents, the overall tuning of the signal is actually only 5 cents off. So that's important because that's important to know, because if you're playing with other people in a band who are tuned perfectly, you might get some dissonance, especially if the detuning is very severe. So what you can do with this particular synth is you can then adjust the tuning. So let's just say this is detuned 10, so we know we're actually -5 below. So I can push this minus to positive 5 cents, and now this synth overall will be exactly back to concert pitch, or whatever you want to call it, back to neutral pitch. Makes sense? Haha, you got that as a pun. All right. Bend, that's not really, you don't need to know that. Okay. Polyphony or polyphony, however you want to pronounce it. This dictates how many notes you can play at the same time. So if I were to go to mono, and I were to play two keys together, one right after the other, but holding the keys, it just, so I'm holding down one and then holding down the other. It switches to the other one, right? Whereas if I were to put two voices, I can now get both keys to play at the same time. So this goes up to 16 voices, which means that you can play chords, okay? Legato is something, I'm not sure how much I mean, okay, in a very most basic retro synth, you may not have this, but this synth has it, and it just what it means is it's just going to blend the notes faster together. So when somebody's playing a very fast lead, almost sounds like Van Halen tapping, right? Whereas if you go to mono, right, it's far more, each note is completely separated. So legato, they're blended together. For the most part, you'd probably keep this on all voices so you could play chords. Voice detune, so you can actually, if you have multiple voices here to play a chord, you can actually detune each note by a certain degree, you know, in relation to one another. And stereo spread affects how wide the stereo field is. And then unison, you can actually increase the number of voices. So technically, this is like a doubler. So you have, if you have two oscillators and this is off, basically just hearing the sound of those two oscillators alone. But if you want to fatten it up, you could double it, and that doubles the sound. You can quadruple it, and then you can, I don't know what that is. You could add 8. Right? And of course the volume gets louder as well. These are controls that are just specific to this, so let's not talk about that. Okay. Now with the vibrato as well, now we have to just talk about the vibrato quickly. The vibrato works not like a tremolo, because it's not a tremolo. Once again, is volume based. A vibrato is pitch based. So with this, you can choose how many semitones, or what decimal of a semitone you want the fluctuations to be, right? And once again, you can choose the shape. All right, so just like the LFO, you can choose a different shape as to how this happens, and you can choose the time of how many beats that happens, the frequency. So that's very wobbled and sickening. Okay. So yeah, that is the basics of. I think those are the most fundamental elements that make up an analog synth. Let's pause for some questions. Somebody hit me with something, please. Don't make me pick on you, because I will. Jay, what's on your mind?
I have no questions at this time.
Phil, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, what would be your desert island synth if you could only have one?
So the funny thing is, I have never used this up until like 3 days ago. I don't. If I've used synthesizers tons of times, but never an analog one. So I only learned this stuff within this week. And the funny thing is, I can see the I can see the use of it, because when you go to the other synthesizers, which I'll get to after this, you can see that all of these toggles are still in there. That's why I wanted to still give a demo with the Heaviosity synths, because all of them still use these controls. These are fundamental controls, and you can't ever get away with them from them, right? But yes, the Desert Island synth I would use is probably Heaviosity's Mosaic bass, and that's the one I want to show you all after this. Now, Phil, I saw in your your message about FM synthesis as well, right? So this, just to go through briefly, this is where it gets a little more complicated as well. So this is an analog synth, but you also have different types here as well. So you have, this is a sync, table, and FM. So because you do have different ways that you can accomplish this stuff. So the way that this works, so briefly, sync, I'm just going to read this because I wrote it down. With sync mode, it combines both oscillators into a master and a slave, so that the cycle of the signal of the slave will be synced to the master. Let's not even bother with that. That's so in this one, there's one, I think one is the master, the other one is the slave, and it works off of that, right?
They follow each other basically.
Right. With table, wavetable generators, wave shape, it's outside of common slur. Oh, right. This one is cool. This one does not use the typical saw and square wave shapes and stuff. This one is just analog. So you just make different. You can make all sorts of different shapes with this by just adjusting these toggles. Right. The other stuff pretty much stays the same, but this is like all the in-betweens that you if you want to get.
Wavetable is, think of it as, instead of having a sine wave, you have this digital set of data that represents a wave shape, and then it moves through different wave shapes over time. Waldorf was the big name in doing wavetable.
Yeah.
Fairlight too.
Yeah.
Fairlight.
Right.
Fairlight was,
I wrote software.
Synclavier. Synclavier. Is that Otis Peterson? Synclavier.
Yep. But that's literally how it works. It's literally got these different digital waveforms, and they're just tables of data, and it flips through them. And so the wave shape, keep in mind with subtractive synthesis, the whole goal is to create something complicated at the start, at the oscillator, so you can filter it into something simpler. And that whole activity of filtering and modulate and changing the amplitude is going to make the final sound interesting.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that.
Some wavetable, you can actually see the waveforms. So it'll actually give you like a little representation as it moves, and you can see where it moves through those wavetables.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. And lastly is the FM synth. So with the FM, this one is a little different. The FM uses a different logic in it to begin with, where you have a modulator wave and a carrier wave. So these two oscillators, one is the modulator and the other is the carrier, right? I believe that's between these. No, actually, no, that's vibrato. So no. Actually, it's just here. This modulator and carrier.
Hey,
Basically,
Khalid.
yeah. Go ahead.
So frequency modulation is basically how radio works. FM radio is frequency modulation. So you take one signal that's fixed, and then you add another wave to it, typically sine wave. So the Yamaha DX7 is probably the most famous FM synthesizer out there, and it has 6 oscillators. And the way it works is you have different ways of summing up these sine waves, and that creates a more complex final waveform to manipulate. And that's really, in a nutshell, what FM is. It's just adding in different ways, different sine waves together to create more complex forms. It's really good for bell sounds and other percussive and pluck type sounds. It's not as great generally for sounding like, for example, a violin.
Cool. Yeah, and basically the way I also understand it as well is that the modulator wave does not actually have a sound, um, but it feeds into
Right.
the carrier wave, and the
Right.
sum of those two things is what creates a sound, right?
Yes, right.
So
That's right. And that's
whereas,
why you'll see they have the different modulation tables in DX7. There are, I used to know, 6 or 7 different ways to route the different waves together to create different sums and they all create different wave shapes as a result. And the amount of each one changes it too. So there's, yeah.
yeah. So basically, now if you have it all the way up to modulator and you play a note, ooh, sorry, I have to turn this on. Why am I here? Oh, that's why I turn all these things down. Sorry about that, guys. I feel like you're not supposed to hear sound there. You're not supposed to hear sound if it's only on modulator. There's something else going on that I'm not seeing. Take off glide, take off all of these things. No, are these on? That's on now. Wait, hang on. Right. Okay. It's not that you won't hear sound, but basically with it on modulator, if you adjust the frequency modulation, you're not gonna hear any change, right? The frequency modulation is only gonna, when you increase frequency modulation, you're only gonna hear that when the carrier wave is involved. So with FM down, that's when you hear the sound. Whereas on the modulator, if you bring that down, and you can introduce harmonics to the modulator, and in harmonics, and you can adjust the shape. So you could even do an ET phone home thing. That's about the sum total I know about this. It's just very, very basic, over the, fundamental thing concept between the modulator and the carrier. Anything you want to add to that, Bob?
Just that, yeah, you're right. Most people say that FM is not intuitive to work with. And so if you pick up, I use a lot of the Arturia archaic synths because I'm used to them. And when I do a DX7, I just fart around with it because Yes, I got my degree in math, and so I understand the theory, but no, it
But it still has the ADSR. It still has filters at the end.
right. That's right.
So that part, yeah, you start with whatever waveform that little algorithm thing said you got, and then you try sort of close, and then you filter it to the.
Yeah.
Right. Again, this is that whole subtractive synth thing where you want to start with a certain kind of sound, and then you're going to apply the stuff to it to shrink it down to the actual sound you want to end up with, and that's basic subtractive synth.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's enough for FM. I do want to just, I did say that I was going to go through a couple of the things I did to get to some of these effects. So let's take a look at what's happening in some of these things. Okay, so it's definitely a synth bass type sound. So for one, I'm playing fairly low octave, low on the keyboard. I'm using a saw shape and a square shape, and I'm actually using, because it's a synth bass and I want the low end, I also have the sine wave in there as well. Cool. I don't have any modulation between the two shapes. I do have a little vibrato though. And this one, the second wave, is 12 semitones below the first one. So it's an octave below. And it's 3 cents above to just give it a little irregularity as well. Okay. And I have them 50% in the middle. So you're hearing both oscillators as well as a sine wave pumping. Right? As for the LFO part of it, even before I get to the LFO, for the cutoff, for the filter, I have the same, 24 dB cutoff, and I have given that envelope quite a lot of authority, and this is the plot that I came up with, right? And so you should hear a fairly fast attack followed by the volume decreasing, or the cutoff, not the volume, sorry, the frequency spectrum decreasing, and sustaining. So you will initially get a little buzz, and then the buzz goes away. I'll move it around so we could hear it. And then I wanted that sort of arpeggiated sound, so I went for 16th note LFO, right? So that's what's giving you the stuttering effect. Let's listen to that. So one thing at a time. Let's first of all identify that the frequency, the envelope. So you're gonna hear a buzz, and then the buzz goes away. So if I wanted more buzz, I'm gonna open up the envelope a little bit more. Right, I want less buzz now. Okay, now let's say I want the buzz that I do have to linger around a little bit more before it drops off completely. Now that's time-based, so that's on the x-axis. Right? And then it sustains down there. Now, if you notice that when I moved it across to the right, yes, it not only took longer for it to decay, but it really stuck around. So I had to pull it down even more, because basically the amplitude is staying high for a longer period of time. Y-axis is amplitude, x-axis is time, right? So that's the envelope. That's the filter. That's how much of the high frequencies we are letting through. Is that a dog or cat? That's a cat. Okay. So okay, so that's the frequency spectrum. Now we're talking about the LFO, which is creating this stuttering effect. Let's talk about the LFO. If I were to change this down to a lower set of beats, you'll hear how that changes. And for this tempo, I just felt that that was enough. That 16th note was enough to give the effect that I wanted, that stuttering effect, right? Also, on this, there's a little bit of vibrato. Actually, it's not even there. So, yeah, this wheel here is controlled by the mod wheel. So when basically, if you're playing live, this gives the mod wheel full authority, and pulling it all the way down means you take away the mod wheel and the effect is fully on. So if the wheel is up and I'm not using the mod wheel, then you're not going to hear it, even though I do have this up. All right, and just to hear what that sounds like without the sine. It just doesn't have the same depth to it, that low end. Right? Cool. No flanger, and once with the volume envelope, you want this thing to punch immediately, so it has an attack, a very fast attack, and barely any release whatsoever. Second one, there's this one. So this one, I wanted for it to sound more like that sort of, cheesy laser beam sound, which is why I have this resonance here. So that resonance is what's giving that high pitched grit, right? Once again, these are the two waveforms I use. I basically just toggle these things around until you find a sound that you like, right? No modulation between the wheels. This one also is 12 semitones below to give just more depth to it. There's no sine wave though, so it's just two oscillators going on here, and this one is 7 cents up-tuned to the first one, and 50-50 split. This one has no LFO, but it does have some vibrato. Let's see. So I think I took it off afterwards, but let's put it on. Why not? Right, and the envelope has full authority. So in this shape here, it doesn't have a perfectly fast attack, so there's a slight little delay to the filter opening up all the way, and then it all comes down all the way pretty much, right? And the attack for the actual volume of the signal happens immediately, and then it starts ducking down. Cool. And in this one, so this is the one where I know it's obnoxious, but I use the glide feature just for the demo itself. Once again, these are the shapes that I use. 50-50 split, 12 octaves below. I kind of like the sound of one of the oscillators being an octave below the other one with a little detuning between them. This one has vibrato and LFO, so the vibrato is all the way on with just a slight vibrato between the two signals, I think, yeah. It has a little LFO, a little less envelope, and once again a fairly fast attack as well. But the main thing about this little melody was to demo the glide. So in here I'm using 60 milliseconds, so you can hear the kind of slur between the notes. And you notice here as well, with the LFO, I've gone for this square shape, so it really makes it very very sharp, the arpeggio. Okay, so, and all together with my little drum beat and stuff. And in doing this and putting it together, I kept tweaking where the envelope opened and closed in relation to each of the lines, so that everything could kind of come out in its own space. right? Because you have each one of them has an envelope. Each one has some harmonics, some buzzes going on and off, and you want to be able to hear those things. The one thing I can't quite hear is the fine arpeggiation of the bass synth, but that's okay. You can't get every single thing. It's not even mixed or anything anyway. Like I could kind of hear it a little bit if I struggle, but it's, you know, it's a small detail that if it's lost, it's lost. That's what you gotta do. Questions on that before I move on to the Heaviosity synths? Any comments so far? David, you alright? You're muted, David.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Just doing my best to take it all in, being a total synth novice. I'm normally of the school that you find a preset and just press a few buttons until it sounds better or worse.
I'm glad you said that. No, I'm glad you said that, because that's basically where we're moving on to right now. And by the way, I just want to demonstrate something. So for all that hard work that I did in putting this together, truth be told, I started with this preset. This is a preset, okay? In this synth called Alchemy, which is a far more modern version, this is a preset. I did nothing, okay? Nothing. And it already, I didn't need to learn any stuff about synths at all. I didn't need to have, you know, I didn't need to spend like last week, you know, deep dive in this stuff for myself as well, because I was in over my head, because this was a preset. And this, it just did everything for me. Now, me personally, I don't like generally in mixing and stuff, I don't like the idea of using presets, you know, for some other AI tool or whatever it is to do the work for me. But with synthesizers, it's kind of, there's nothing wrong with it because there's so many. People spend all day, their whole lives just coming up with different presets, and you could sample through them. So in this is the advanced tab on the synth, but you could go simple, which looks like that, which is amazing. Or you could go to browse, and on this synthesizer, in this particular one, these are all the presets. So you could go, you know, under arpeggiated or on brass or drums or pads or whatever, right? So I think I went on the bass and subcategories. So these are the subcategories, and then you have genres and timbre, and you have all kinds of different things, you know. Let's just see what some of these sounds like. Right, so actually that was the one thing I did to this. I just added an arpeggio. That was all I did. Rate. How do I turn this on? I think it's this. Yeah. Right, so I picked a preset and I clicked 2 buttons. That was all I did. Okay? So the point about using presets is very, very, very valid as far as I'm concerned with synthesizers, because nobody has the time to go and make these things from scratch. The only reason I might grab this retro synth thing here is if I'm trying to get a very, very specific effect that it is, I mean, in this day and age. Okay? And let's take a look, as we say that now, let's take a look at some of the kinds of things that you can do with synthesizers. And these people from Heaviosity are particularly bonkers at it. Sorry, so I'm moving around the camera. So this is using Contact, which is Native Instruments. And anybody who's done these deep dives with me before has definitely seen this. I'm just going to copy this down here. Right. Okay, so using that same bass line, and let's pull up. So these are different synthesizers that I have here. The one that Heaviosity Mosaic Bass. So everybody likes synth basses. They sound amazing. Okay, so now that we know those fundamentals, this is gonna make a little bit more sense. Can I resize this? I cannot. Sorry if I can't see this. You don't really need to, because we're not getting into any fine details. But basically, what this synth is made up of is 3 sections, 1, 2, and 3. So these are like 3 synthesizers all built into one. And with that, you can get all kinds of crazy things. That's just the first thing. Let me just see if I can pull up let's just try this. Right? Can you imagine the amount of stuff that is going on in the back there? As a matter of fact, you can take a look. So these are like the 3 panels. Well, look at this. Attack, decay, sustain, and release. Wow, who would have thought, right? It's these fundamentals carry over even into the most modern, complicated synths. Okay, the same things apply. So if you wanted, if you were so inclined, let's just say you pulled up this preset and you told yourself, this is exactly what I was waiting for, but it just needs one little tweak. You can go into control, you can go into that channel and make a little tweak to one of these things if you wanted, right? ADSR. Also here you can see envelope, EQ, filter, drive, gate, and space. Okay, well, we didn't talk about those, but envelope, EQ, and filter. We just talked about these things. We know what these things do. We know what an envelope does now. Envelope opens and closes the filter. The EQ, that's more like, I guess, like a static EQ, or maybe a different way of doing the EQ. Bob, how does EQ differ from envelope? Do you know?
EQ would be the filtering, envelope would be the application of volume, right? The amount of something. That's what envelope does. Envelope changes the amount of something over time. Filter is setting the way in which you're subtracting from the signal.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe it's a way to attach an envelope to a specific band in an EQ. You know, you can just drop a band and then bring it back up again. That's what I'm assuming it is. But yeah, I've not seen that before either.
Perhaps. But you'll also notice that on some of these things, they actually have automated sliders for it to vary. So if I pick up another one. So I get all kind of. Oh, hang on. Look at the amount of craziness going. I'm hitting one key. Right? There's just so much going on here because there's 3 synths packed into one, right? I don't even want to call these oscillators. I mean, are these one oscillator, or are these several oscillators built in?
Or are they just digital oscillators instead of analog?
Well, they're samples. Contact is a sample engine, so it samples probably of different waveforms, and they're slamming them together in different interesting ways. This is the value of Contact, is to be able to manipulate samples in really useful ways. Old samplers just played them back. This lets you do all kinds of cool things with a sample, and as you note, some of the samples could just be acting as waveforms to the engine because it's got a full synth engine along with the sample engine.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite ones. This one's called Analog Undertones. So it's, I guess, based on an analog, but it has overtones probably put on a lower octave, right? So undertones. And it works well as a sub bass. So it's a decent sub bass tone. I've used this one a lot of times, but it has like a little bit more, just a hint of bite to it. Whereas my absolute favorite one I've used on so many tracks is this one called Dark Signs. So because this is even with the name should give away the fact that because it's sine waves, that it's going to be far more mellow, right? It's not going to have a whole lot of harmonic content, and it works awesome as a deep sub bass. And it's just it's way down there. It's lush. You know, it's thick, but it's not. It doesn't have a whole lot of harmonic content. So what I'll do is I'll often just layer this in a track below everything else. You know, just softly, just to have some warm low end built in like that, right? So under let's see. So these are the mellow ones, and all of these are presets here. You could, you know, just choose all these. So these are not going to be overly gritty. You could pick any of these, and they just have different levels of complexity to the tune. You could pick on the rhythms. These are more these are rhythmic synths, so they're sort of arpeggiated. Wanna see, and you can see all the different effects and filters and stuff moving in and out to give you these wobble effects, right? Right? And each one of these, you could also adjust the volume level of each one. You could adjust the pan, you could adjust the detuning, you could solo one, you could mute one. So let's just say this one was, you know, really nice, but you really don't like that kind of scratchy thing going on in the background. Let's identify it. Right, so say I don't want that. So I'm going to mute that. And there we go. That's all I need, right? So that is Mosaic, and then they have pads as well. So these are going to, on the ADSR plot, these are by definition going to have a slow attack. Well, in this case, in this particular one, it has a long release, a fast attack but long release. And it's still there, right? So the same fundamentals apply. Let's take a quick look at, you know what I'll do? Let's pull up a project that I was working on, because we pretty much, what did I do? That's not what I wanted to press. Save that for a second. Open recent. Protocol. And hopefully this does not crash on me. We're almost done, guys. I just wanted to show you all some real quick here.
Khalid,
Tell me.
did you update to 11.1?
No, my this is a poor little Intel i5 chip that I have in here. It would spontaneously combust if I even suggested it.
Alrighty.
It can't take the update. So next year I have plans to update to whatever the latest chip will be. You know, that's on the cards. But this is even a Logic 11. I don't even know. It might be Logic 10. I'm not sure. No, it is a Logic 11. But I don't even have. There's certain things I don't even have. So that what's it called? Is it called Chroma Glow? The saturation. Yeah, so I don't even have that. All you guys are way ahead of me right now. I can't. This can't even take that. So I got like the new drummer module and stuff, but there are a lot of modules in the new one that I don't have. So all the conversations that you guys are having about the new Logic, I'm like, have no idea what y'all are talking about yet.
No. The reason I asked is that I use Contact also, and but they sent an email to me about waiting to upgrade till they, you know, catch up with your Apple, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll see. When the time comes and I upgrade, we'll get to it. Okay. Very very briefly for a couple of minutes here. This is a piece that I wrote. It's almost completely there are two guitars here, and everything else here is pretty much heaviosity. So it's just a demo as to what you can do with different synths, right? And this is in a more practical sense, because it's one to just make nice wall tones, but once again, these are all presets. I didn't do anything any of these things, right? I don't know what I was looking for. So let me play this. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at some of these, just a couple of these synths, just to hear what was going on in them. Just unfreezing. Give me a second. Poor i5, trying its best. So this whole thing just started with this one guitar riff idea that I had. This. Right, that little chugging idea. From there, I then added a synth bass. This is with the Mosaic bass from Heaviosity. Sounds like this. So you see, this one is it's called Bring Pulse. It's an aggressive one, so it's more gritty, and it's sort of is arpeggiated the right word, boy? What is it like? Yeah, you could say arpeggiated, right? And the point is to just bring it in, take it out, bring it in, take it out, right? I don't want anything too lingering around too long. So then from there, we go into another one by Heaviosity called Mosaic Keys. And actually, even before I get to that one, because that one's not playing a melody, I just want to talk about the backing for now. Well, so this is an interesting one. It's called Scoring Stars. There's another one by Heaviosity, and it's a guitar. It's an acoustic guitar sampled instrument, right? This is what it's a kind of like a pad. The two of them. And those things are pretty much playing out throughout the entire thing. Ascend is another Heaviosity instrument synth. This is a piano synth. So this is not the best one. If you want a dedicated piano sound, it can do it, but it's not the best. But as a piano synthesizer, they basically sample a piano and then they go more electronic with it. This is what this sounds like. So it has all these reflections. Also kind of arpeggiated. And actually, where is it? Is it settings or source? Right. Okay, so this is what's cool. You have different ways, different samples. You can different ways that these are the miking positions, whether close, room, or under the piano. I forget what PPP stands for, but I guess that's a mix. No, and I'm not sure what that is. But struck. So you can choose different articulations as to how the note is played. So whether it's a muted, right now it's muted sound, but you can get like a metallic sound, a wooden sound, or actually no, striking the string itself with metal or wood or a chain even, right? And with a sustain, you could get sustained notes where they drag a brush over it, or twine, or an electric bow, and you get harmonics, all sorts of different things. So this one is insane, the kinds of things you can do with that. And then finally, the Mosaic Keys, the two Mosaic Keys. So do I have three? I have some different things going on here. Let me remember. Okay. So this one has like a lot of more like verb reflections going on. And it definitely has some additional harmonics. Let's check the next one. Mind if it's the same synth for that? Yeah, so it's the same synth but playing two different things. And then this one is more gritty. Yeah, so look, that's basically what I wanted to demo there. The point is that you can, with these synthesizers or any other you know what I'm trying to say. There's so many different presets that you can just find the preset that you're looking for, but now you hopefully have a better idea of how to make little fine adjustments or what some of those additional toggles mean. That's basically, you know, the length and breadth of everything I have to say. You know, if anybody has any questions, you know, let's see if we could answer them quickly, because I know it's getting late for some of y'all. Anybody? Let's see. Who can I pick on? Who can I pick on? Phil, what? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think you've covered most things. I mean, I would just say, just find a preset you like, and then just start tweaking it. Just experiment. And see what happens. That's quite a good way to just explore synths, really.
For sure. Thank you. Mary, what tell me, good, bad, or whatever. What do you have to say?
Well, I have used presets also, but the more I hear about what each thing actually does, the more it sticks in my head and the better it is for me to understand which button to go for, when I want to change something. So I very much appreciate getting to sit in on this.
Glad, very, very much for that. Let's see. Anybody has any questions or anything? Because I know we went through a lot of crap here, and I blitzed through it because I know it was for some people it's early, for other people it's quite late.
Do you have any suggestions for free synths to play around with? We probably all have our own anyway, but I just thought any real go-to ones that are freely available.
Well, if you were fortunate enough to have Logic, you would have a bunch of free ones already built in.
I had a negative Logic in my Google search. So
I think did Phil, you mentioned there was a good free one somewhere along the way?
There's loads. Yeah, Vital's quite nice. Wavetable based one. Pendula, Newfangled Audio, that's great fun to play with. It's just completely bonkers, but Monolith is really good. I think that's Blease. Yeah, if you want a free DX7 to try to play around with, Dext is really good. That's another great freebie one. Just trying to think. There's a free one of the Mini Moog, and I can't remember what it's called. That's quite good.
Well, what we can do is, obviously the conversation doesn't stop here, right? So we could generate a list and share if anybody is interested in this kind of thing. Also,
just real quickly, you haven't mentioned Massive. I'm a Native Instruments guy, and Massive, if you love knobs, Massive has like pages of knobs. You can tweak it to your heart's content. It's
Monarch's really nice as well.
Yeah, if you want a
that's really nice. There's quite a lot of quite nice synths. If you got like complete, there's quite a few, because the FM8 is a really good version of DX7. That's really nice.
And the retros are amazing.
Yeah, there's some really nice stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm really glad that Jay asked me to do this, because I myself, up until about less than a week ago, I'd never really properly dug up into the finer analog controls, where all these synths, where all these tones kind of come from a fundamental state, and I'm definitely better off for it now, because after doing that, I did go back into the heaviosity stuff, and surely enough, all of those controls and more were there, you know, all the time. I just never took the time to look into it. So, you know, whether you use it or not, it's always kind of just good to know how things start at a fundamental level. You know, anybody has anything to add, Jay?
This was fantastic. I'm really glad you did it, and thank you, Bob and Phil, um, and Brad, for chiming in when you did. I think the session was the better for having a bunch of people all contributing their experience.
Absolutely, 100%. Thanks very much, you guys, for coming as well. Bob, you have something to say?
Yeah. Thanks again, as ever, really informative. I'll probably still stay as a preset kind of guy for a while to come, but I was going to learn this stuff properly at some stage. So you've saved me a bunch of time, and when I do go looking, I'll have a lot better starting point than I otherwise would have had.
Well, the thing is now, when you get to that perfect preset, but it just has too long of a, it just keeps hanging on, and you want to cut it shorter, you now know ADSR and you know how to fix that. So there, I can now
Absolutely
shrink it to where I actually want the sound to be.
Yeah. Or it has a little too much buzz, or you want a little bit more buzz, or something like that. I absolutely agree. That's how I'm going to use this information as well. I go straight to preset and just make little tweaks from there. And that's I don't think anybody in this day and age is suggesting that anybody start with a sine wave and build it from scratch. There's absolutely no need to do that in the modern world, right?
Oh, I still have my micro moog. Come on. I was showing it earlier. My micro moog, I actually used it about a month ago. So, every so often you pull out those old beasts.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the hobby, right? I mean, that in itself is the hobby. So yeah. But yeah, that's it for me, guys. Thanks very, very much for joining and taking part, and certainly thanks to Bob and Phil in particular for clarifying a couple of things that I wasn't too sure about as well.
Yep. Yeah, thank you all. I'm going to end this now. Really good seeing you. Stay well. Have a great weekend, and see most of you next week. Take care.
Take
Great
care, guys.
stuff.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
bye.
Khalid, it was really good. Thanks.